Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Pantry to Plate. Do you see this huge, beautiful vegetable in front of me? I'm so excited because we have these giant cabbages in the warehouse here. So I know I've talked about cabbage before, but I thought it was a really great time to bring up some new ideas on how we can use this giant cabbage. So first of all, you may notice this is half of one of these huge cabbages from the warehouse here at the food bank. So all of the recipes that I'm going to show you today, I have only used half of the cabbage for 3 different whole recipes. So that will tell you how many people you can feed based on the size of one of these cabbages. So I would love to know if anyone has a guess on how big this cabbage actually is. We'll just give you some time at the bottom in the chat box to make some guesses, and then later on in the episode, I'll bring it up and tell you how big it is. So remember, this is half. So this is like the size of my head, 1/2 of the cabbage. I'll give you a hint. It's like the size of a big turkey. It's pretty big. Okay, but why do we love cabbage here at the food bank? It has a lot of great features that are great for our time and for flexibility of how we can prepare it at home. So you can eat cabbage raw, you can eat it in stir fries, add it to soups, and it's packed with nutrients, and it's also super affordable. So you can find different sizes at the grocery store. So that gives you the opportunity to choose the size that fits best for you. And it's usually a cost per pound. So if you're like, oh, that cabbage is just like a little too much expensive, you could pick a smaller one. But the thing is that they provide so much vegetable once it gets chopped up. So I want to show you one thing about the outside of our cabbage that is really beneficial to know, because cabbage has a super long shelf life. So the outside of the cabbage might not look the best, but you can peel off a few layers and see that the inside is perfectly fine. So I just wanted to show you, this is one of my outer leaves from the outside of the cabbage, and I wanted to show you some of the blemishes that are on it, because there's nothing wrong with this cabbage. It just has some spots on the outside. So can you see the spots here? Yeah. So this is completely normal for your cabbage to have spots. There may be some broken bits on the outside of the skin, and it might look dirty. That is totally fine. You can peel off a couple layers and have a perfectly good cabbage on the inside. And it has a really long shelf life. So if you use half of this cabbage and you're tired of cabbage for your week, you can store this in your fridge for a few more weeks. It's that simple with our cabbage. Okay. First of all, I wanted to get my first recipe started, but I wanted to show you a couple of easy ways to go about cutting this huge cabbage. So the first recipe I'm going to start, I got my pan all nice and hot here. I'm going to make an egg roll in a bowl recipe. That camera will be back in a minute. So I'm going to make an egg roll in a bowl. This recipe is really, really special to me because I have egg rolls in my past and in my current life with my mother-in-law, who has a restaurant, and she rolls egg rolls. So I know that she would be thrilled to have a cabbage this size because it reduces how many times she has to cut something. So let's start our recipe, and I'm going to show you how to cut this guy up. So for our egg roll in a bowl, we're going to use ground turkey as our protein. And then, let's see. Okay. Camera's all good over here. So we're going to use ground turkey, but first thing we're going to do is we're going to start by adding some ginger and garlic. So I used fresh today. Let's see. Can we add that second camera back to the stream? Perfect. Oh no, of course. Of course, let's flip it here. There we go. Okay, so I've got some ground ginger and garlic, fresh, I mean. You can also use ground. Fresh is when it's available and you have some extra time, is also really tasty. So I'm going to add that to my pot. It's already nice and heated. You can check that by hovering your hand above it. Feels good. I'm gonna add my garlic and my ginger. So we don't want to cook this too long by itself because it can burn really quickly, but you do want to start with this because it kind of infuses your oil with the flavor of garlic and ginger. All right, it smells amazing immediately. Next thing I'm gonna add is my ground turkey. You can use other ground meats, but turkey is lean and it's often cheaper than our beef and other options like that. So using my turkey, and I just added that to my onion and my garlic and my ginger. Onion comes later. Okay. This is gonna take a few minutes to let that get brown. All right, let's come back to cutting this huge cabbage. So when you're working with big round vegetables, you want to make sure that you start with a flat surface. So it's kind of hard to do that when your cabbage is this big. So what I did to cut it first, I had it on its side. I put the knife straight down the middle, and then I pulled the knife towards me while holding the cabbage in place. When you do that on the opposite side, you would put your cabbage straight down the middle, and then you'll also just pull the knife towards the cutting board just like that, and that'll help you get two sides. So then the next thing you want to do is put your flat side down. You want to find where your root end is here. So the root is the knob on the bottom, and then you're going to cut it in half again. So we can do the same method. So here, straight down, and then push it towards the cutting board. There we go. Pull it out. Turn your knife around, and you do the same thing on the other side. There. So now we have our halves cut into quarters. So still, this quarter of a cabbage is like the size of a regular big cabbage. This is a ginormous cabbage. Next thing you're gonna do is you're going to cut out the core part of your cabbage. So you can see it defined. It's just where the root was attached, and it can be really bitter. I know some people who cut this out and eat it on the side while they're cooking the rest of their cabbage. Totally do that. You could throw it in your compost, or you don't have to keep it. So there are different ways that you can do this. I like to take my knife and just start it at the top of that little corner and just cut it right out. So you end up with a little triangle piece, and you're gonna toss that aside. We're not gonna use that. The next thing you'll do is cut this into manageable pieces. So you can cut it in half, or you can cut it into wedges. That's totally up to you. There we go. Turkey's cooking. Bump up my heat a little bit. So the next thing, we're gonna cut it into a half. So I got it on a side here. So I'm just gonna cut it from an angle on the side just to try to get it even. You wanna cut it along the shape of the cabbage. Here we go. So at this point, you've got these inner pieces will often pop out, and this is where the most compact and hard pieces of the cabbage are. So it can be a good idea to pull that out and have your thinner section on the outer leaves, so you can cut this separate, because this doesn't have to be cut as small as the inside does, because you want your cabbage to cook evenly. So the outer leaves might cook a little faster, but the inner leaves, where they're really compact, might take a little bit longer to cook. So you want to cut those a little bit smaller. So now you've got your little outer section. You can just lay it flat onto your cutting board, and it makes it easier to cut it this way. So depending on what you're making, you might want to cut it into small little thin shreds or some bigger pieces. It's your preference. So I'm just going to cut it into thin pieces because this is what I'm using for my cabbage roll, my egg roll recipe. There we go, just like so. So some of these pieces have a little bump, and this is where some of the thicker pieces, the ribs of the cabbage are. So when we cut these thin, it helps them to cook faster. So that's why that's important. Okay, so just like so. It's gonna take a minute to cut this one up because it's so big. I'm not gonna do the whole thing. Okay, let's continue. I just wanted to give you that insight about the inside being really tough sometimes. So much extra cabbage. All right, so I've got my ground turkey over here cooking in the pot, still working. So I'm gonna go on to the next recipe while that's cooking up. So the other two recipes I'm going to share are side dishes. One is a little more hands-on and one is pretty hands-off. So you could choose based on how much time you have available to cook. The first one I really love because you cut it up, you put it in the oven, you leave it, and then it's done. So we're gonna make some roasted cabbage wedges. And I've already got a portion of my cabbage here ready to go. And I'm gonna cut it into wedges. So this is a quarter of my cabbage cut in half. So I have some already prepared that I'm gonna show you at the end. And this is the other half of my quarter. So with a whole cabbage, if you were making this recipe, you would end up with about 16 wedges. So each half will be cut into 8 pieces. So you want your wedges to be pretty thin. So that's the point here. So I'm going to cut this in half here. Okay. I'm going to cut it in each half in half. And then I'm going to cut it in half again, and that will give us 8. So you can see how wide this still is. We want this to be a lot thinner so it cooks evenly and gets crispy on both sides. Some of your little inner pieces will fall out. Not a big deal. Cut it one more time. There. Okay, so there's a couple of my wedges. What you're going to do is start with a greased sheet. So instead of using a brush with some oil, if you have that, you can totally do that. I'm going to use some cooking spray. So I'm going to spray the bottom first so it gets brown on the bottom while it also gets brown on the top, because we're going to bake this at 450 degrees. It's going to be a really hot oven. So we want to make sure we've got enough oil, but not too much oil that will make it greasy. So I'm going to add my wedges pieces here. It's fine if they fall apart. Like this whole wedge just fell apart, no big deal. It all depends on how loose or not loose the inside of the cabbage is. Okay, so I'm going to do this guy one more time. All right, and we're going to lay those flat. So now that our pan is full of cabbage and ready to go, I'm going to add some seasonings. And I'm also going to spray the top so we can get it brown on the top while also browning on the bottom. So I've got my cooking spray here, but I'm going to add some seasoning first. So my seasoning is salt, pepper, and sugar. Not a lot of sugar. When sugar is cooked, it can brown whatever it's on. So we're using the sugar to help brown the top along with the oil. Cabbage also will often have some bitter flavor, just based on what time of the year you're eating it. Sometimes it's sweet, sometimes it's not. So adding a little sugar to the top can help balance out the flavors while also helping it to brown. So I'm going to spray my cabbage. using the spray, like you don't have to wash a kitchen brush, which can be really annoying because the oil just hangs on to it. So you don't have additional dishes to wash if you wanted to use that cooking spray. So this is my salt, pepper, and sugar mixture. You can add other flavors to this if you wanted to add some garlic and some onion, or some paprika, or some cumin, some curry, whatever you like will go delicious on your cabbage. But you just want to make sure that you've got that little bit of sugar added to it to help with the browning. Okay. My turkey looks much better over here. It's almost done. Give that a stir. So I've got my cabbage. I'm going to put it in the oven, 450-degree oven, for about 25 minutes. So it takes some time to get some good color on this cabbage, but it's going to be tender. Some bits will still be a little crispy. I think that's delicious. And then you can serve this as a beautiful side dish. So this is going in the oven. 25 minutes. And voila, here is the finished product. So we've got our roasted cabbage wedges here. We've got some really brown, crispy edges. That happens a lot with Brussels sprouts too, but that, you know, is delicious. If you like roasted Brussels sprouts, this is fantastic. So it's nice and tender and roasty, and I'm gonna eat a piece real quick. The sugar is so good. Don't be worried about the sugar because it's not a lot. It's 1 teaspoon of sugar spread out all of the cabbage. So you don't get a lot. Yum. That really is delicious. Let's go back to our cabbage roll. I keep saying cabbage roll. It's an egg roll. So we've got our ground turkey here in the pot on our second camera. Beautiful. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to start adding my vegetables. So for our egg roll, we're going to have some shredded carrots and some thinly sliced red onion. You can use any onion that you have on hand. I happen to already have a red one, so my dishes all have red onion today. Don't go buy a separate type of onion if you have one already. And then we've got our cabbage. So the recipe calls for 1/4 of a cabbage. So we can't take that to heart with this huge cabbage that we have. So I just got a nice 2-cup measuring cup and filled it up. If we need some more, I'll toss some more in it. But that's where I'm going today because of how big our cabbage was. So I'm going to go ahead and add my onions and my carrots. So my carrots are grated carrots. They're going to cook pretty fast because they're thin and uniform in size. There we go. Yum. So I'm going to mix that in with my turkey. It smells so good with the ginger and the garlic. Okay. So I'm going to pour in my sesame oil, which is a huge part of the flavor of this dish. So this is about 1 tablespoon of sesame oil. If you know anything about sesame oil, the flavor is strong. So this flavor is really going to come through the whole dish because of how much we're using. If you're not a fan, leave it out or just use a smaller amount. And you're going to smell that immediately. Yes, that's such a good smell. Okay, I'm going to add a little bit of my cabbage. So I wanted to say that the portion of the cabbage that I have going into this dish is the inside because of how big my cabbage was. So this is the harder inside. So I cut it really thin so it will cook fast. I'm going to do about half of it and then mix it in and then add the other half. How pretty this is. Okay, and then the rest of it. And then I'm just gonna let it cook for 5 to 10 minutes, depending on how crunchy or how tender you want your cabbage to be. I'm gonna add the lid here. It's gonna steam it while also cooking it from the bottom. And I'm gonna switch my burners so we can show that last recipe. Okay, here we go, here we go. Oh, forgot the most important ingredient, of course, soy sauce. So my rule of thumb with soy sauce is always use low sodium. And if your recipe serves up to 6 people, 1/4 cup of soy sauce is okay. If you use more than that, the salt in your dish will be higher than the American Heart Association recommends for folks who have high blood pressure. So 1/4 cup for 6 servings is a good ratio. If your dishes, if you're using less, serving less people, you want to use less soy sauce so you keep your salt at a manageable amount. We're also not adding any additional salt, just the soy sauce. Go. Why are we beeping? Here we go. So that soy sauce in your egg roll in a bowl is going to bring out some of the moisture in the cabbage. So it's going to create a bit of a sauce as it cooks down. Okay, last but not least recipe. This one is really delicious. We are calling it a Parmesan sauteed cabbage. So we've got about 4 cups of cabbage here. We've got a few cloves of garlic. I don't count garlic. I use as much as I think looks delicious or smells delicious or how I'm feeling on that day. Measure it with your heart. So as soon as my oil is ready, I'm going to add my onion. So I've got my sliced red onion here. It was a big one, so I'm using about half of it. You really like onion, you can add more if you like. The red is a really great color contrast to your cabbage. So I always choose that for this recipe when I have it on hand. All right, so my oil is ready to go. I'm gonna grab, we don't want this to taste like soy sauce. Got our onion here. There we go. We'll give it just a second because this is pretty quick cooking too. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and add my garlic. Remember, you can always use your ground garlic in place of fresh. Just gonna give it about a minute in here. And then I will add my cabbage. So at the end is when we add our Parmesan. Make sure you leave a little bit out so you can have a little sprinkle on top. If you have a block of Parmesan and you grate it really fine, that melts quicker than this version that I have. It is grated, but it's not super fine. So if you want it to melt a lot, get a super fine version or grate it yourself, whatever you have. The combo of onions and garlic is always just magic. Okay, gonna add my cabbage now. stir it up, and let it cook. A lid will also be beneficial for this recipe to help your cabbage steam while it cooks from the bottom. I love this color contrast. We're also going to get different nutrients based on the color. So if you've got white onion and cabbage, which is green and white, similar nutrients, while the red onion is going to give us other antioxidants. Okay, let's take a look at this egg roll recipe. There we are. Let's see. Looking good over here. It smells amazing. Okay, so I'm taking my lid off of the egg roll recipe. I'm going to serve up some of these cabbage wedges. I would love to know in the chat what you would love to serve these cabbage wedges with. Yum, this looks so good. Roasted cabbage wedges, nice and crispy on the edges. 25 minutes in the oven, hands off. Let's see, how would I serve these cabbage wedges? I think I would add some cumin. I think some cumin would be really delicious to this basic seasoning that I added to it. Or you could put some taco meat on top of it instead of using a tortilla. That's an option. So good. I'm hungry. All right. Let's take a look at this egg roll over here. All right, let's serve it up. Here is our final egg roll recipe. It's all nice and saucy from the soy sauce. You can cook it down to where your sauce is a lot thinner than this. Yum. So I'm going to top it off with some toasted sesame seeds, and some green onion. It smells just like an egg roll. I'm excited to taste it. I'm afraid it's going to be really hot. So good. Just enough salt. Nice garlic and ginger flavor. So good. Okay, friends, let's look at this cabbage recipe one more time. There we go. Parmesan sauteed cabbage. Some Parmesan cheese on top. Final product. So good. See, the Parmesan is going to add the salt to our dish to balance out the flavors. So think about some other flavors that you can add to it, and taste it with the Parmesan before you add any salt, because the Parmesan is a really salty cheese. Okay, let me take another bite. Can you tell I'm hungry today? Delicious. I hope you enjoy these cabbage recipes. And if you get one of these huge cabbages from the warehouse here at the food bank, you can feed a ton of people so many different dishes. So I hope you will try roasting some cabbage wedges, or making egg roll in a bowl, or this delicious saute with some Parmesan cheese added to finish it off. So let us know in the chat what you might be interested in hearing us talk about in the future. We'll see you in a couple of weeks in November as we get ready for the holidays. So thanks again for joining. Oh, I need to tell you, our cabbage, 18 pounds. The huge cabbage is 18 pounds. That's the size of a big full-size turkey. Insane. Okay, thanks for joining, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks for the next episode. Enjoy your cabbage.